members of this audience won't have had the chance yet to watch the film quite yet. Can you give us a little glimpse, a little synopsis of the movie?
Sure. First of all, thank you all for this warm welcome. The End is our kind of golden age musical about a last human family surviving alone in a bunker decades after environmental catastrophe has left the world all but uninhabitable. It's like The Act of Killing and The Look of Silence, a film fundamentally about storytelling, how we tell stories to obscure the world from ourselves, to obscure our pasts from ourselves, and because we are our pasts, to obscure ourselves from ourselves. It's about how we make up and cling to excuses to ease our regrets, how somehow we manage to believe those excuses, which is to say it's about the uniquely human ability to lie to ourselves and the terrible consequences of that self-deception. There's a mother, a father, played by Tilda Swinton and Michael Shannon, a son, played by George, a doctor, the family's doctor, Lenny James, butler Tim McInerney, and the mother's best friend and a kind of surrogate mother to the son, played by Brona Gallagher. And son is born in this place and has never seen the outside world, never seen the sky. George can talk more about the character, and I'm sure he will later as we dig into this. And at some point, I guess that the bunker is really a kind of prison of shame, where the parents in particular, but all the older generation that have raised son, kind of hide the truth about the world, agreed to have a kind of mutual agreement to keep secrets from the son. And son's job is to reassure all of them that he believes their lies, really, even as he has fateful clues about the truth. And then one day, a young woman, a sole survivor from the devastating world above, which we never see, breaks in. And the question is, and brings with her, I suppose, the gift of honesty. And the question is, how does the family respond? Is that a shitty song?
No, it's great. There's tons of great songs. You have that, Brona's a musician as well as an actress, and Michael has made music as well. But definitely, I think you're right that the majority of us would sort of say that this is not our usual thing that we do. So, but again, like I think, like any project I don't know, myself personally, I want to try new things, try new mediums, try new ways to learn, sort of ways to express myself, and acting and storytelling and all of that. So that the fact that the musical nature of this was so integral to the storytelling, and again that kind of golden era inspired musical, again, as much as it was a bit nerve-wracking and sometimes embarrassing, it was another reason to want to do it.
I can see that. I would be extremely scared, but that's why I'm not an actor and you are. But Joshua, going back to you, you are known as a maker of very serious documentaries. Why choose to create a fictional feature? Why choose to leave your line and then not only do a fictional feature, but go full-on musical?
Well, I sometimes think The Act of Killing was also a musical. It has 2 musical numbers in it.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of humor in it. And now we've made a very serious musical that also has a lot of humor in it. And I wanted to make, though, a third documentary in Indonesia about the billionaires who came to power by taking advantage of a country that was terrified of them, because they knew that the people knew that these men were involved with the genocide in 1965. But after The Act of Killing came out, I was unable to return safely to Indonesia. So, and I still can't return to Indonesia. Indonesia now has the son-in-law of the dictator who masterminded and came to power through the genocide as its president, Prabowo. Anyway, I started investigating, therefore, oligarchs elsewhere who made their money through mass violence, and specifically found an oil tycoon in Central Asia who had used violence to obtain the drilling rights to his oil fields, his oil concessions, and to clear people off that land. And I became somewhat close to him and his family, and he invited me to tour a bunker that he was buying and planned to develop into a bunker much like the one that you see in the end. And walking through this place with his family, I was just haunted by these questions that I could not ask him. Questions like, how would you cope with your guilt for the catastrophe from which you would be fleeing? How, to his wife, who I could see was sort of uncomfortable and was already talking about how few people they would bring, how would you cope with your remorse for leaving loved ones behind? And then they talked about potentially staying there for a long time and raising a new generation, and I started to imagine, well, what if you raised a generation that had never seen the outside world, so you treated them as a kind of blank canvas onto which you could paint some idealized portrait of yourself as a means of easing your own conscience. Much like, I would say, Anwar Congo, the protagonist in The Act of Killing, uses those dramatizations. And I realized that these questions were not specific to a wealthy family fleeing a catastrophe of their own making. These are universal questions. How do we deal with our children honestly? How do we take responsibility for our role in this world? What are the many ways that we, in lying to ourselves about the impact of the choices we all make and our often failure to get involved in the political collective movements of solidarity and compassion that we know are the solution to our most urgent problems? How are we already living in bunkers? Sort of haunted by all these questions, I left this place thinking the only film I want to make with this family now, this oil tycoon's family, would be the fly-on-the-wall documentary set in this bunker 25 years after the family moves in. And I realized I wasn't going to be making that film. So I then, on the way home, to kind of just clear my head, put on one of my favorite musicals, which is Jacques Demy's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and then thought to myself afterwards, I know what I'll do. I'll make a film called The End. It will be a kind of golden age musical, or a dark age musical. The family will be American, because this is a quintessentially American genre that's rooted in delusion, in the false hope that you can just bury your head in the sand even when you know you're accelerating toward and over the edge of a cliff, even though you know you're accelerating toward your own mortality, after which it's too late to build a meaningful life because you're gone. And yet, with your head in the sand, you can tell yourself the sun will come out tomorrow. Your future is bright, as they sing in the film. And that false hope, I realized, is indeed false. It's not hope at all. It's despair in the sheep's clothing of hope. And I thought, if I make a golden age musical set in this bunker, it's the perfect form to explore delusion and denial and sentimentality, and how that, unless we find ways of being honest with ourselves, we will head right over the abyss. The end is our mortality. It's our collective mortality as a species. We hopefully, and I believe we will, or at least we can, I believe we can still avoid the worst of the climate catastrophe that we're watching unfold if we act now. But our species is mortal. It could be, we still are stockpiling nuclear weapons, we're still creating more destructive nuclear weapons. There are many ways we can kill ourselves. And each and every one of us is mortal. And these characters are nameless because they're you. And I feel the purpose of my filmmaking is to hold up a mirror to us, always individually and collectively at the same time and in the same image, where we are able to see specifically the delusions, the lies that we cling to, the rationalizations that allow us to carry on as we are, and that hollow out our capacity to love, because being mortal, we have only one chance to live, to be together. This moment we're sharing in this theater with all of you, with you, George, with you, Ida, this is our life. This is all you have. This is all I have. And if you do this through distraction, or when you hear about the genocide in Gaza, which I have to mention because it's being carried out in my name as a Jewish person, and it breaks my heart and fills me with rage at the same time. Or we read about 1,000 people drowning in the Mediterranean Sea as they escape conditions of miseration and war that we have created for them, so that our energy and our material goods and electronics and food remain cheap. And we hear these stories, and we feel, at least initially, when they're new to us, when we're not yet numb, we feel momentarily heartbroken and astonished and shocked. And then we quickly, not knowing what to do with that, search for just the right emoji to express our outrage on a social media that has all of us isolated and addicted to dopamine, to the dopamine rush of having your friends cheer you on as you post that emoji. And we post that emoji, and through that inherently sentimental and escapist gesture, give ourselves permission to turn and look away and distract ourselves with something more amusing, giving up the opportunity to listen to your heart and talk to someone right there and then, to break your isolation and talk to someone, to reach out to a neighbor, a friend, a family member and say, but we have to do something. What shall we do? The end is our mortality. We may be too late to solve the climate crisis. Each and every one of us, in a stroke of tremendous bad luck, could die tonight, or from some premature illness. The question is not, what do we do to solve all our problems? We know that we can't solve our problems alone, and we know that we can't solve our problems if we pretend they don't exist. The question is, being mortal, facing the end, having it in our nature to grow old, to get sick, to lose the people we love, and finally to die. How must we live? And that's what I want my films to leave you all thinking.